네, 그럼 다시 공공 미팅을 이어가도록 하겠습니다. 이어지는 세션은 미술교육 박사이며 현재 마드리드에 소재한 레이나 소피아 미술관에서 교육부서장으로 근무하고 계신 마리아 아카소님의 렉처 퍼포먼스 들어오세요, 하지만 바로 떠나세요, 배제를 끌어안는 미술관 교육부서의 논리입니다.
Once upon a time, I was working as an associate professor in the Fine Arts Faculty of the Complutense University of Madrid. I have been teaching for several years in the education department of this faculty, and my subjects were related with art education, and I have been teaching artists the possibility of becoming educators, and I have been talking with them about the possibility that education is as sexy, as creative, as intellectual, as critical as art. After being there for 25 years, I take a break. I was around 6 months as a freelance, and then I have an incredible proposal of being the head of education of the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid. I've been working in the museum since 2018 as a head of education, and it was very, very nice for me because I arrived there at the same moment that there was this amazing exhibition of Luis Kamitzer, one of my best friends, and I really like his work as an artist, as an educator. The name of the exhibition was Hospicio de Utopías Fallidas, and I have to make all the mediation around this exhibition. So what I have planned is not to give service to the exhibition, but to make in parallel a public program, which is now shown in the next picture. We take this very big table from the basement of the museums and put it in halls. So with this, we want to make this symbolism about taking education from the bottom of the museum and put it in the high point of the museum in the halls, in order to say our statement about what we want to make with education all these years. So this disrupting methodology that I have been working within in the university is the same methodology that I am now working within in the museum. Once upon a time, I want to say that the department that I found was really big. It's around 20 mediators, 20 volunteers. We are 6 people in programming, around 2 people in administration, 2 people in communication, a lot of people working in also social media. We are with a lot of collaborators this year. So I think this is very important to know that I really think that probably education is the biggest department of the museum nowadays. Once upon a time, there was a castle. When I arrived in the museum 3 years ago, I find, of course, a castle that has, of course, a monster. And this monster has 3 heads. The first head was collection. The second head is temporary exhibitions. And the third head is public programs. So we have this big and ugly and very old three-cephalus monster where we have to work about. When we arrived there, we found this dynamic that I am sure that a lot of the people that is watching to us have found in the place where they are working, which is something that I call the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel is this sensation that you are producing, but you cannot never stop in order to think about what you are producing. No? Every day there are thousands of fires, thousands of things that you have to finish, like in the next hour. So this was something really making us the sensation that we cannot finish, that we cannot rest, that we cannot have a break to think what we are doing, and especially what are we doing this for. And what it was true is that we arranged with the institution to have 3 months of stopping, And in these 3 months, we find something very important. And the thing that was really important is that this castle, where we were working with the cephalus monster, it was a castle, but this castle was not for everyone. This castle was not for everyone. And how we discovered that? We discovered that because we read this book. In these 3 months of taking a break, we read several books, and this book called Exponer o Exponerse, La educación en museos como producción cultural crítica. We found this amazing article done by Paul Preciado, the philosopher. And in this article, we have found an incredible key word that give to us all the meaning about what we want to do in the future in the museum. In this article, there is this text. The museum is part of a network of disciplinary institutions that were created in early modernism. This process began with the expansion of colonial Europe in the 15th century and crystallized around the 19th century with the construction of what Michel Foucault named as the total institutions archipelago. The museum is a dispositive for otherness that builds identity and difference. Foucault considers these institutions as total or totalizing because he says they work through the logic of including exclusion. That doesn't mean that the other is excluded, but the other is included as the other. So we found this very, very important keyword, which is including exclusion. Including exclusion is this sensation that have in the museum a lot of the publics, that they are getting inside the institution, inside the space of the institution, but at the same point that they put their feet inside the institution wants them out of the institution. Which are these publics? Of course, they are the children, they are the adolescents, they are the elderly, they are the communities programs, the migrants. So all these publics that the museum is really proud to invite them to come to the museum because it's really what they have to do. But at the same point that they are inside, the museum wants them off of the museum. We were thinking about this, this key point, and at the same point, we found that this sensation of exclusion that the museum make for the public was something that is coming inside the core of the museum. Because inside the museum, there are these two big departments, collections and temporary exhibitions, and then we have public programs. And what happened is that exhibition and collection makes this a feeling of excluding to the public programs department. So it's like amount of matriuskas, where in the big matryoshka is the museum, and then the museum is, making the public go out. But then inside the institutions, we also have the same procedure between collection and temporary exhibitions into education and public programs. And inside public programs is happening the same thing within real public programs at education. So education is really like in the bottom end of the power hierarchy of the museum. This is also something that Paul Preciado also writes in this article, and I want also to read this text to you. What's the complex relationship of hierarchy or even political rivalry between the exhibition space and what's commonly known as activities or public programs? I refer to this conjunction of programs that have been situated in a subordinate or marginal position within the museum institution, that appear as a footnote of the exhibition or collection, or as an additional element to supposedly attract new audience, to establish a better relationship with the social context in which the institution inscribes itself. I really think this text is very, very important because it's the first time that I have read in all these productions about museums and, public programs and collection, everything, this word of subordinate related to education departments is something that in every education department we feel, but is no longer writing in anywhere. And this text is taking this reality and put it on the table. So thinking as ourselves as a subordinate position, we were really thinking that there is this dynamic in the museums that makes otherness. The museum is a fabric or is a monster that is producing otherness to this kind of publics, which are not the elitist public, of course, and this sensation of being the other, and in the most of the cases, to be an ignorant other, is the feelings that a lot of publics have when they get inside the museum. In order to change these toxic dynamics inside the museums, we think about undoing otherness, how from the education department we can undo this feeling of otherness. This is something that in the pandemic times, a lot of museums have talked about, especially directors, about this thing that I call affective turn. A lot of institutions have been talking about the importance of care in the institutions, but I think that they have done this in a very theoretical way. The only real way of taking care of the institution is something that education departments are doing. And when we are doing that is when we are doing this thing about otherness. When we are making that, we can connect with two ideas that they are really in the core of what is affectiveness, and is these opposite models of monogamia versus what I call relationship anarchy. We can say really that in the museums there is a traditional couple, which is this couple between exhibition and collections, and this is an old model of affectiveness. And then we are going, or I think we have to go to a new model of relationships in general, but specific in the museums, where there is not this couple, this traditional couple in the top of the hierarchy, but what we have found is a constellation of things, in our case, a constellation of departments, where collection on exhibitions, all the library or education of public programs, or the people which is cleaning the institution are at the same level, or at least we try to make visible this hierarchy in order to unbuild it. So there are these two really big models: monogamy, relationship anarchy. In monogamy, we have our hierarchy with collections and exhibitions in the top, and in the model that we are proposing, there is this rhythm of departments that work together. In this model, in the new model of relationship anarchy, is where we are based, and we call that in our museum, in the education department of the Reina Sofia Museum, the Museum of Bonds. And this is the name of our program. In this new conception of the power relationship into the museums, there are three key points. The first of all is the new promiscuity. The new promiscuity is a dynamic that makes departments have relationship between each other, instead of departments that they have no relationship with the rest of the museum. I really think that the people which is watching this and working in an institution know what I'm talking about, because sometimes there is no any communication or very less communication between the departments of a museum. And what we really need now is promiscuity. We need to mix up, we need to know who is each other, and to make these love relationships that really is an example of care between the different departments of an institution. The second key point is long long-term bonds. We don't want in our program to make connections with the public that long, 1 hour, half an hour, 2 hours. No, we want to make long-term bonds. We are now making programs that at least are 2 months, 3 months, because we want really to make a deep relation between our programs, the public, and ourselves. And in the third positions, we have this attempt of the suppression of hierarchies. We are very capturing and letting us know the invisible power relationships of our institutions and taking care of them. It's really an utopia to make them get off, but I think it's really important to know that they are there and to try not to make this pyramid with this couple in the top position, but this constellation much more democratic, much more flexible, and much more political. As an example of new promiscuity, we have a program that we have developed with the library, between the education department and the library, that is called Almost Books, and it's really very nice for us, this program. In this program, we think that the collections of books of the museum has the same importance that the collections of art pieces of the museum, and we put them in the same level and make relationship between them. In the second case, when we are talking about long-term bonds, we are talking about, for example, a program called Teams. In these teams are small teams of people, around 12, 15 people. We have adolescents, we have people in the beginning of their careers, we have elderless people, we have people with disabilities. And in these teams, with people that is running these teams, they stay around 9 months making these programs inside the institution. So when someone is related with an institution for 9 months, they, of course, know the relationship is completely different than if you came there and just stayed half an hour. At the end, when we are talking about the suppression of hierarchies, we are trying to understand the mediation activities as art pieces. We are working with artists and with anthropologists and with curators and with a lot of professionals, but they are building pieces. And when we are talking about mediation, we are not longer talking about a service to the public, but we are talking that the public, these artists, and the mediation team all together are making pieces that are at the same level as the pieces that the artist or the curators makes in the collection or in the temporary exhibitions. So just to finish, if we want to make a resume, I will choose 3 principal ideas of this talk. The first of all will be including exclusion, this idea that we take from Paul Preciado and bring into institutions, especially in education departments, and this sensation of being invited into an institution, but at the same point, the institution is telling you to come out as soon as possible. The second key point will be otherness, how this including exclusion makes to a very specific type of publics this sensation of ignorance, this sensation of being loud, this sensation of being slow, and this sensation of not being proud, that the institution is not proud about these publics. This is a very strong feeling that a lot of people, I think, they have into the institution. So what we have to do as education departments, undoing otherness. This is the key point. This is the dynamic that we want to make in my museum, in our museum, for the rest of the period that I will work there, is to undo this feeling of otherness that have to be a feeling of happiness, a feeling of security, a feeling of knowledge. Of course, a feeling of knowledge related with diversity, but a feeling of really everyone is welcoming into the institutions, and the institution is not selecting in an invisible way who is the right public and which are not the right publics. So with these 3 points, we finish, remembering, including exclusion, otherness, and of course, undoing otherness.